So, at one point last week, near the end of the sermon, I said something to the effect that most of us here do not really think of ourselves primarily as poets or theologians. That we don't think of ourselves as poets or theologians. Now, it's okay if you don't remember when I said that in the sermon. It was something I sort of bounced off and breezed on by. But it stuck in my head. And I'd like to revisit a little bit because this week I've been asking myself, what if we were? What if we were poets and theologians first, and whatever else we may be second? What if these were the lenses we used to consider existence? Now, in the church, at least, these are related disciplines. Poets, after all, have always been closely linked to the Spirit, to the divine. Not to orthodoxy necessarily, but to following their own, often mystical, theology. We open today with those words from Ralph Waldo Emerson. The poet is the sayer, the namer, and represents beauty, he says. For the world is not painted or adorned, but is from the beginning beautiful. God has not made some beautiful things, but beauty is the creator of the universe. Beauty, he says, is the creator of the universe. Now, as I said earlier, I think of Emerson as more of a philosopher theologian with a poetic soul. More that than an actual poet. People like Emerson are at their best building universals out of their experience and observation. True poets, on the other hand, are just as likely to double down on their observations and experiences, digging deeper into the soul of a topic, leaving room for the thought and experience of others who then encounter these ideas. That is the role of the sayer and the namer, as comfortable describing a landscape as the inner workings of our hearts. In fact, rather than looking at the abstract, philosophical, or theological ultimate, frequently the poet's lens is focused on more immediate, more intimate concerns, is fixed at or near the self, which is both an invitation and a challenge. An invitation and a challenge. In Carl Sandburg's autobiographical poem, Chicago Poet, he writes, "I saluted a nobody. I saw him in the looking glass, and he smiled. So did I. I said, 'Hello, I know you.' And I was a liar to say so. I said, 'Hello, I know you,' and I was a liar to say so." Perhaps this, at the base of it, is why we need to be poets ourselves. One of the insidious effects of the world we live in is that it not only drives us apart from each other, it separates us from our inner selves. It makes us liars, maintaining the mask of a richer, better looking, more sophisticated, more popular identity. And to the extent that we cannot know ourselves because of this mask, to the extent that we cannot know ourselves, we become anxious. We sense that hole that we cannot fill. For example, I think at times we have all sat and conversed with people who spent their time trying to convince us of their greatness. I can think of a few people right now. And we know, because frankly, if we were to be honest, we've been that person, we know that they are really trying to convince themselves, filling that hollow space inhabited by our insecurities with words. And we have also known and been people who cannot stop listing our inadequacies. or the inadequacies of others. Failures measured with borrowed rulers that we use to punish ourselves and each other. Now, Sandburg is right, of course. We never fully know ourselves, just as we never fully know each other. But that not fully knowing may be a curse and an embarrassment if we perceive our ultimate goal as perfection, or it may be a blessing. It may be a blessing. An adventure that does not need the world's means and resources, but merely the poet's eye and the mystic's openness to the movements of the divine. Our not fully knowing contains a call to know better. Our not fully knowing contains a call to know better. In fact, the future of humanity requires that we see this unknowing as a call, as a blessing, as a new frontier, because if we do not undertake this adventure, then our lives are merely in service to a larger economy. I don't know what they're doing down there. Now, certainly we see that imagery of the larger economy in Sandburg's poems as well. In Prayers of Steel, he writes, "Lay me on an anvil, O God, beat me into a steel spike, drive me into the girders that hold a skyscraper together." And on the face of it, this poem may sound celebratory or joyful, but looked at in another way, it's disturbing, making the soul subject to societal structures rather than those of nature and the spirit. It's as if the beauty that Emerson talks about is created rather than the creator. As if the works of humanity, of the material world, are somehow also the ultimate reality. Trapped with some role in that steel skyscraper, trapped with some role in that steel skyscraper, we still want to know ourselves and our world. But our poetic mind, our mystical, theological mind, lacks worldly value. And our practical mind, which is valued to the world, lacks the tools. All our practical, mundane minds can do in this situation is do what they always do, which is make lists. Lists of achievements, of accomplishments, of tasks and acquisitions. We see these lists in our CVs and eventually in our obituaries. Mine contains things like Master of Divinity, 2000, Doctor of Ministry, 2010, served the Eliot Church, 2003, to present, married in 1994, became a parent in 1998. And yours is probably somewhat different, but similar to this. Important moments on our list are only lightly examined by practical minds for the sake of efficiency, marking the outer alterations to our role and status, but not the inner motions that got us there. Without poetry, without mystical theology, we struggle to describe this list with any depth. After all, we sometimes lack the language to do so. But poetry gives us that language back. Liar, fool, dreamer, play actor, soldier, dusty drinker of dust, writes Carl Sandburg. He will go with me down the dark stairway when no one else is looking, when everyone else is gone. Those social markers are not what we keep. They are among the things we cannot take with us. Now, poets and theologians, even in the midst of the primordial soup of our cultural expectations, poets and theologians pause. They mark the time differently. They look closely, both at themselves and the world around them. And with these observations, experiences, and lessons, they build a different vision, an alternative reality within the chaos. And then they steer through that vision toward that alternative reality, the just and better world, the commonwealth of heaven. Our prayers to be of service to the skyscraper and to the structures of humanity, our concerns about status, wealth, and achievement, and the supposed joy they bring, run counter to the true message of poets and theologians and the true reality of the ultimate. Emerson tells us that the highest revelation is that God is in everyone. The highest revelation is that God is in everyone. And when God selects David in 1 Samuel, God does not consider money or culture or societal expectations or attractiveness or achievement. No, chapter 16 says that God does not see as mortals see. They, the mortals, we, look on the outward appearance. But God looks on the heart. God looks on the heart. God is a poet, too. It is the heart, you see, that matters when we look into the mirror and see that face looking back. What matters is what our poet's heart and our theologian's mind tell us, even if the view is imperfect. What matters is finding the truth, finding our true selves as well, so as to see everything more clearly, to see our holy place in creation. For as Sandburg says, I lose all but not him. I lose all but not him, not the one in the mirror. So let us once again take a moment of silence to consider the vision and to accept our role as human beings with the gifts of poetry and theology and of God. Blessed be. Now let's turn to our final hymn.